Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin, and this is Life, Liberty, and Levin Sunday. We have two great guests tonight, Senator Ted Cruz and Julian Epstein, an old friend of mine, was a big Democrat. Now he has some questions, and we want to pursue those with him as well. But before we do, you're aware of these Supreme Court decisions. I've been railing against the judiciary and what the judiciary has been doing for months, indeed for years, indeed for decades, but particularly these rogue lower court Democrat judges. And I've been railing against the violations of our Constitution, again, for years, and I've written a few books on the subject, you might notice. But I want to put this in some context, and I want to do a deep dive. I took time to really digest these cases. Some of our legal friends have been kind of dismissing it. It's just a procedural issue. There's 14 other ways to bring cases. No, it's a major league case. This case involving these universal injunctions. And this case involving Montgomery County School District in Maryland is a major league case. But here's the problem. In better times, these cases would never have been necessary. What our lower courts were doing built up over time, but what they were doing during the Trump presidency, the first term and now this term, unprecedented. These judges who did that, they will remain in place for life. They are a cancer on the body politic. They are a cancer on our constitutional system. They're not going away. They're there for life. And we had three Supreme Court justices who thought what they were doing is perfectly fine. They were destroying separation of powers, which is the core principle in our Constitution. And three of them thought it was fine. Kagan, who originally thought it wasn't, she's a complete hypocrite. She's demonstrated it. And Justice Jackson is out of her mind. She doesn't belong on this court. She was basically, through her opinion, screaming epithets, screaming labels, slogans, and so forth and so on. And she didn't have a leg to stand on, but it doesn't matter. And the chief among them is Sotomayor, you'll notice, always from my perspective, always a definite vote against the Constitution. But these two cases are a problem in another respect. I've written this book, I might as well mention it, on power. It's going to be out in about 4 weeks. It's a very, very important book and addresses this and 1,000 other things. This is about power. So what are we looking at here? These courts that went the way that they went, in this school district that's going the way it went. This school district defying parents, we're going to get into this, who insisted that they will teach their kids in elementary school about LGBTQ+, whether the parents know it or not, like it or not, and the kids can't get out of the class. So in my new book, I call this authoritarian democracy. You see, we go through the motions of a democracy, or a republic, if you will. But really what we have here is authoritarianism, and it's getting worse. Whether it's these lower courts, these federal courts, or whether it's a school district. You elect those school board members, right? So we go through the motions of a democracy. These justices, in this case, these lower court judges, and these three justices, they're supposed to be the epitome of what the Constitution's about, and yet it is who we are trying to control. Authoritarian democracy. Let's take a look at this. First, we take this case involving universal injunctions. This shouldn't even be in front of us if the courts were operating as they're supposed to. Justice Barrett, we give her credit where credit's due, surprisingly so, but she was good. And not only that, she dukes it out with Jackson. And really, it's a knockout. The United States has filed 3 emergency applications challenging the scope of a federal court's authority to enjoin government officials from enforcing an executive order. Traditionally, courts issued injunctions prohibiting executive officials from enforcing a challenged law or policy only against the plaintiffs in the lawsuit. The facts of the case, the law of the case, it's the case in the courtroom. The injunctions before us today reflect a more recent development. District courts asserting the power to prohibit enforcement of a law or policy against anyone in the whole country. These injunctions, known as universal injunctions, likely exceed the equitable authority that Congress has granted to the federal courts. Congress grants these powers to the courts. These courts are not in the Constitution. Congress creates them, empowers them, determines their limitations. We therefore grant the government's applications to partially stay the injunctions entered below. The question whether Congress has granted federal courts the authority to universally enjoin the enforcement of an executive or legislative policy plainly warrants our review. It's easy to see why, by the end of the Biden administration, we had reached a state of affairs where almost every major presidential act was immediately frozen by a federal district court. And during the first 100 days of the second Trump administration, district courts issued approximately 25 universal injunctions. Now, we lived this together as they were going on. I was pounding my fist that this is unconstitutional. This is a rogue judiciary. They're destroying separation of powers. I went through the history. I went through your Constitution. I went through the history of Madison's notes. I went through the history of Marbury versus Madison, which was bad enough, and we went through all this stuff. It's not even a close call. You had three of these justices, the three radicals. They supported it. I'll get into that. Some say that universal injunctions give the judiciary a powerful tool to check the executive branch. Wow. She points out that federal courts do not exercise general oversight of the executive branch. They resolve cases and controversies consistent with the authority Congress has given them. When a court concludes that the executive branch has acted unlawfully, the answer is not for the court to exceed its power, too. Justice Barrett, you know I haven't been a fan. This is a great decision, what you wrote here. Justice Alito, he says, okay, but we have a little problem. These judges are still there. They're still radical leftists, my words, not his. They're still Democrats in robes. They were put there, as Schumer said, to thwart Trump. They're ideologues. They should be nowhere near a courtroom, let alone as judges. He says, so I see two weaknesses in this. Third-party standing. They're granting third-party standing. So this is a way that these judges can, rather than adhere to what's really required to have standing, especially for a third party, loosen it up, liberalize it. So they open their doors to all kinds of people. So he warns about that. He says we should have dealt with that. Then this issue of class action suits that you've heard about, class action suits. There's a rule, Rule 23, that has very particular details about what you can do to have a class action. And he says these same judges, I mean, either third-party standing, they may loosen that up, and same with these class action requirements. He signed on to the majority, of course. He's just warning. He's warning, we may be back here because these people may try and circumvent it again. Which tells you what? Which tells you about the lack of integrity and the lack of willingness to comply with the Constitution. And even this Supreme Court case that Alito foresees, and you know what? Alito's right. And here we have Justice Jackson. Her dissent is longer than the case's opinion, or it's pretty close. If you're going to read anything, you should read this, because this is a perfect opinion on what a radical, out-of-control justice of the Supreme Court wants to happen. This is it. This is crazy stuff. And so if you want to see where the left is on this, read it. Now, why is this so important to Jackson, who is the most radical, Kagan, who proves herself to be a hypocrite, and Sotomayor, who's the leader of the team? Because Woodrow Wilson told us that the power of progressivism, a.k.a. American Marxism, is in the unelected judiciary. Those lower courts were doing exactly what the Democrat Party wanted them to do. They were doing exactly what Sotomayor and Kagan and Jackson want them to do. And if they get two more justices on the Supreme Court, they will rip up this decision, and they will do exactly what I said. They rely on the unelected judges. They rely on the unelected bureaucrats. They built this massive bureaucracy with the help of Republicans, but it was their idea. It was their idea. It was Wilson's idea. And others, you're going to learn all about this in this book on power. So when they have this massive bureaucracy and Trump's taking it on and Elon Musk is taking it on, you got to firebomb the dealership, you got to attack the vehicles, you got to destroy the men, you got to investigate them, you got to deport them. You see what I mean? And that was just the attacks on Elon Musk. And so these courts come in and say, leave this edifice alone, this fourth branch of government that's not in the Constitution, that we progressives, radical American Marxists have created since the 1920s. That's our baby. That's how we rule, the bureaucracy, the courts. That's why Jackson wrote what she wrote. That's why Kagan doesn't mind being viewed as a complete hypocrite. That's why Sotomayor leads the three. That's why Alito's warning, these other federal judges at the bottom level here that we just tried to curtail their activity, they're going to find other ways to try and do what they do. Authoritarian democracy. Authoritarian democracy. So this is the big picture. Some of my friends are saying, well, it's basically a procedural thing. It's not a procedural thing. This is a battle royale. And President Trump has taken them on, and he defeated them. Pam Bondi took them on. She defeated them. Their lawyers defeated them. But we're not done. I guarantee you. It could be 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. They want to rule through the courts. They want to rule through the bureaucracy. Those judges are ruling against Trump left and right, whether it's immigration, whether it's a reduction in force, whether it's access to data, whether it's what's on their computers, whether it's whatever it is. No, 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 no. We want to diminish the power of the presidency only when a Republican has it. They want to expand it when a Democrat's in there. But we need to handicap this guy, Trump. He's a danger to society. He's a danger to them. As he tries to institute the promises he made in a landslide election, he is a danger to them. And what the Supreme Court justices did is said, you guys in the lower courts, no, you can't keep doing this universal stuff. This was not controversial before. It started to pick up in the 60s a little more, but under Trump, it's like a reign of hell. A reign of hell. Now, I want you to look at it this way. If we didn't have these 6 justices rule as they did, what would we have here? They would have had to explain something, some standard that these lower court judges would have. I've been thinking about what would that standard be? Not a very good one. The doors would be thrown wide open to the Wilsonian American Marxist ideology, where not only what they're doing be upheld, they'd be encouraged to do more of it. You'd have a complete deconstruction of the Constitution, a complete deconstruction, where a conservative or Republican president would be constantly looking over their shoulder and answering to 700 federal district judges, mostly the activists, because the conservatives, the constitutional, would say, that's not really what I'm supposed to do. So the activist judges, the Democrat judges that Schumer said they put on there to thwart Donald Trump, which means thwart the electorate, undermine the election, an insurrection, if you will, they would not only have full reign in what they're doing, it would expand even more. Separation of powers would be completely destroyed. That's how important this case was. But those judges are still there. They're going to be ruling on a zillion different cases that still affect our lives, whether it's immigration or 1,000 other things. Then we have this case involving a school district. A school district. Can you imagine a school district in this Montgomery County, Maryland, is nuts. It's sort of Moscow in Maryland, although it's worse than Moscow. Again, you go through these motions, you actually elected a school board and your parents, but you have no say. Authoritarian democracy. I'm going to make that term famous again, and I'm going to make this book on power. Must reading. Must reading. Authoritarian democracy. What is that? Well, you have a school board. And so they set up these courses, and they have books and coursework and so forth, LGBTQ plus, all kinds of sexuality. For high school, no. Middle school, no. Elementary school students. And you got kids going there, you got Orthodox Jews, you've got Muslims, you've got practicing Catholics, or whomever else. Just somebody says, whoa, whoa, whoa. My kid's 7 years old. What kind of crap are you putting in their face? You know what? I want to see it. I want to consent to it before I allow my kid to go in there. So many parents opted out that these courses went away. And the school district say, no, you know, we, a school district, we exist for the teachers' unions. We have a couple of teachers that teach these courses. You're going to do what we say. We're going to have these classes, and you're going to send your kid. It's now mandatory. And we don't have to tell you a damn thing. Now, let me ask you something. 25 years ago, would that fly? No. Would it even enter anybody's mind? No. These cases are a push against the Democrat Party and the radical, agenda that they are pushing. More and more of these cases are we the people against them. You know, you used to have legitimate disputes, contract cases, or this state versus this state, who has power when you have a conflict of laws, things like that. No. You're now defending parental rights and defending the free exercise of religion under the First Amendment in a school district. And everybody's biting their nails. How will it turn out? You know how that vote went? 6-3. The same 3 justices. Why? It's part of the Democrat Party, American Marxist agenda. That's why. It's authoritarian democracy. And the courts are going to back the Montgomery County School District. The Supreme Court, their justices, they're going to back the rogue judges. They're going to back this massive federal bureaucracy. Doesn't matter if there's bloat and fraud and it doesn't matter. We need that 4th branch. That's how we rule. We need unelected judges. That's how we rule. Now, when they win elections, they say they have a mandate. When they lose elections, what do? They go to the unelected branches to try and cripple Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the greatest threat they've ever faced, ever. He's dealing with the bureaucracy. Dealing with the bureaucracy. He wants to appoint more actual constitutionalists to the court. And what is a constitutionalist judge? Takes a look at the law, the facts, in his or her courtroom, and rules right there. They're not looking to make law nationwide or stop things nationwide or undermine a president. What is a constitutionalist Supreme Court justice? You just saw them. They look at the Constitution, the statute, the facts, and they stay in their lane. What about the other guys? There is no lane. There's no lane. And so we are actually fighting an ideology that comes out of Marxism. They call it progressivism. I've explained this for many years now, that does not adhere to the constitutional construct while it waves it around. It is incompatible with constitutional government. Their ideology is incompatible with constitutional government. So we have these 2 crucially important cases that should never had to have been brought to the Supreme Court or any court, where we have a school district that is denying parents the free exercise of religion under the First Amendment and destroying parental rights over how you raise your children. That should not even be a matter of cultural activity, but it is. And we have federal district judges who are destroying separation of powers, destroying the role of an elected president who won in a landslide. It has to go all the way to the Supreme Court. These are 2 cases which in a healthy republic wouldn't even exist. That is what we're up against. Thank God they ruled as they did. You know what they ruled for? The status quo. Federal judges, you have a lane. Stay in your lane. School districts, you don't have the power to indoctrinate the children of parents who don't agree with your radical left, sexualized, perverted agenda. These cases would never have been even thought of 25 years ago, and here we are. I want to thank the 6 justices who stood together. It's not a conservative court, it is a constitutional majority. I don't always agree with a couple of them, and I'll continue to challenge them when I don't. Criticize justices or not. They got it exactly right here. But I want you to understand the bigger context of what's taking place here. There's going to be more cases. There's going to be more battles. This is just the beginning. And we won 2 damn big ones. Congratulations to the United States Supreme Court, to the 6 constitutionalists on the court, our president, who is relentless in taking these people on. And, by the way, notice he follows the rule of law. Now, let's see if these lower federal judges follow the order of the Supreme Court, huh? And let's see. Any of them won't.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.